Welcome, Reanimated fans. Hello, I'm AJ Conrad here with Stuart Tiffin. Hello, Stuart.
Who are we? What are we doing here?
Well, this has been a long hiatus due to travel, holidays, just all sorts of other things that got in the way of us talking. Though we were also on the same coast and unfortunately didn't get to see each other. That seems to be our jam.
Boo.
What happened next time? Next time we will eat seas candy or bagels, depending on the coast that we're on, right? Or whatever delicacy you would have on the West Coast. What would you do on the West Coast?
Sushi?
Sushi is pretty damn good out there. I admit I ate a lot of it when I was in LA. That was good.
Now I'm just
I
hungry for
also had
sushi.
I was in San Francisco a very limited amount of time, but I did have some amazing soup dumplings, which were pretty good.
Nice.
So, you know, but that's for us to discuss down the line. But today we're back. We're going to talk about The Signal, which is an older film that I admit I didn't hear about, and I thought that this was actually the Stephen King one we had talked about before, but it is not.
Well,
Um,
they're both named The Signal. And
I,
the one
in
we've talked
fairness to
about
me, I
came
was
out
like, this. I
later.
will say when you sent me the sort of like, I was like, this doesn't seem like the same film. So yeah. Anyway,
Yeah. But
uh,
they're not that far from one another,
they
frankly.
aren't.
And there was actually, sorry, was the Stephen King film called Cell or
Mm,
The Sig?
was it? I thought it was still
Isn't there
kind of.
a movie called The Signal starring Lawrence Fishburne that is not at all related to this stuff?
I don't know. There might be a lot of these films called The Signal, but the point is that this is not the Stephen King one, and this is written and directed by some independent filmmakers, David Bruckner, Dan Bush, and Jacob Gentry. Um, and so we're going to talk about that. But before we get to that, we have a couple of news items. I'm going to kick this off by talking about my favorite, Pedro Pascal. This isn't even a news item. I'm just talking about him because we all know how much I adore him. Anyway, he's been making the rounds in the various like awards places, and he hasn't been winning anything, but he's been having like a lot of like interaction and coverage. I think for a few reasons. One is because he's very charming, but two, because he and Karen Culkin have started this kind of funny banter back and forth during the award ceremony. So when Kieran Culkin won his Golden Globe, he basically told Pedro Pascal to suck it as part of his speech, which I thought was kind of awesome. And then at the Emmys, Pedro Pascal basically said that the reason why his shoulder was all messed up because he's been wearing these very artfully draped slings to go with his outfits. He basically said that Kieran had beat him up during one of
Jeez.
his intros. So the hilarity ensues, although they are pretty funny with each other. But you know, I was sad that he didn't win. For obviously the things he has been doing this year, and he's been doing a lot.
Was it
But
all Last of Us, or was it what was he up
I
for?
think it was all Last of Us. But I feel like he had a couple other nominations, maybe. But obviously the Last of Us is mainly what people are doing, for him. And anyway, he's awesome. More of Pedro. Hopefully, this just means that he gets more work this year, and eventually we'll get his awards, and he should, because he's awesome. Anyway,
Mhm.
my Pedro fangirl accolades ends there. But for real news, and this is sad real news, that Black Summer Instagram that we saw was unfortunately fake and was deleted, and so that's kind of sad.
Well, the
Um,
real sadness here, HA, is that they had access to like a lot of behind the scenes stuff. They had cast members who liked their posts, but I mean, was following this along on Reddit since they were deleted, but it was fairly easy to figure out that it was fake because they're like based in Indonesia and had five other pseudonyms for the account in the
well,
past.
yeah.
So it was a fake account, and realize that now. But they kept posting, they kept hope alive for Black Summer by posting not like infrequently, but every so often, like every 6 months, they would have another post. And then around the Christmas, they had two back to back that were like 2024, something is coming, and people were losing their minds. And then the account was deleted a couple days later. And the scuttlebutt is Netflix was like cease and desist. You gotta shut that shit down because we're not or we're not ready to talk about it, but more likely we're not doing another thing with Black Summer. So stop getting the people all riled up.
Well, I also think you could look at it in a positive way, which is that if the people are all riled up, maybe you should make it. Just saying.
Yeah.
Um,
And on that Reddit, on the subreddit for Black Summer, people keep saying like, look, Netflix keeps updating the teaser for Black Summer, like the video clip that they're using to promote the show keeps ch getting updated, and it's continuously being promoted and recommended to viewers, which we've talked about a couple weeks, well, months ago now, probably on this podcast. Netflix has not stopped like pushing this content, which that's a good thing. I mean, at least they're not like taking it off the platform altogether, like we've seen with some stuff.
but let's talk about something more positive and something that we were like, they just keep teasing this. Is it real? But it looks like 28 days later is actually going to happen.
28 years later,
Sorry,
yeah.
28 years later. Speaking of other Golden Globe peeps, Danny Boyle's talking about it. It's in the works. There's a little bit more than just them talking about it in interviews. Apparently, they're even floating the idea of a trilogy. And it would definitely be Boyle directing at least the first film, and Garland is writing all three. So that is pretty cool.
It's
Yeah,
this has not been picked up by a publisher yet or whatever it's called, but
I think they will just I
we'll
think
see.
they're trying to stir the interest, and I think it's there. And honestly, I think with Cillian Murphy winning the Golden Globe for Oppenheimer, and I have a feeling, I mean, I hope he wins the Oscar. He deserves it. But like maybe this is the time, and why they are pushing this so hard is that people to have that like top of mind, because he's talked about it too. But we'll see what happens. This admittedly got my hopes up probably a little bit more than they should be, but it looks a little bit more real than it did before. I guess that's all I will say. Like they're actually gonna, it looks like they're gonna like try to shop it as a package.
Yeah.
So
I
so
hope
that's
it
pretty
wouldn't actually come out 28 years after the first movie though, but they could age up Cillian Murphy if he agrees to come back and be in 28 years later. And he would only
I
be
mean,
what,
he's
eight
he's
years off or so, or
yeah, it's not that far off, and they could certainly age him up. And again, he seemed pretty psyched about the idea of this, as long as Danny Boyle and Alex Garland are attached. Um, so that's
this
pretty
this
cool.
could be huge. Yeah, I'm pretty excited. I'm cautiously excited about this because if they haven't even, they were talking about in the Hollywood Reporter article about selling this package coming
Mhm.
up soon, which means that they're still a long way away from realizing this.
Yeah, but if Zack Snyder can sell his packages, they can sell theirs. That's all I will
Have you
say.
seen Rebel Moon yet?
No.
Dude, it
Uh,
was very mediocre.
yeah, I would imagine. Anyway. And then last but not least, there is a trailer out for a Norwegian show, uh,
It's Norwegian, yeah.
a Norwegian movie,
Yeah.
sorry, called Handling the Undead. And I don't know, like we were just talking about this before we started recording, but this is the based on a story or a novel by I don't remember his first name. I know his last name is Lindquist. And he is the author who wrote Let the Right One In. And that was, I feel like the American version of the film was in like 2010 or around there. But that book itself was incredibly well written, if not disturbing. But this trailer has a lot of, even in just like, it's not, it's like what, like a 2 minute trailer, and
Yeah.
it managed to disturb me like handily, very, very quickly and easily.
It's a
Uh,
well-edited trailer. The premise is also just extra disturbing. Like it does have zombies or people coming back from the dead, but they're not a meat. They're at first they're kind of like catatonic, and not they don't attack. And so it's about like their loved ones take them in and try to like nurse them back to life, if you will.
right,
I don't know exactly where the story goes from there, but it feels sinister. There's a sinister element to this
right.
trailer.
Well, there's also like an emotional and a like
Yeah.
I mean and sorry, it's John. Lindquist, and this was a novel he wrote in 2005, but it was translated into English in 2009. And um, so I guess, yeah, it's been out there a while. I did not hear of it, which is a little honestly surprising because
The
normally I kind of
book
keep, yeah, because no, I really like him, and so usually I get recommendations for things I've read. So I'm kind of surprised I didn't get this. But in any case, it reminded me a little bit of The Leftovers. Is it The Leftovers where they come back from the dead? Is that the one I'm thinking of?
is
Or
it Leftovers or
no,
yeah,
no, the Revenants. The
yeah.
Revenant. That
That one where it was where they were just like normal people, but were a class held apart, as I
this is
recall.
a
That was
little bit more.
French, right?
This is a little more sinister, just because at least
Well,
there's
they're
like,
not, yeah, they're not sentient or they're not aware, it seems like, when they come back, at least in the
or
trailer.
or they're sort of, but not really, and there's like decomp going on. So like, and most
Yeah.
disturbing is like there's like a kid, um,
Hmm. He's
clearly
like
is,
the most,
yeah.
I think the kid is often just a puppet is playing the kid. It seems like anyway, which will be scary too.
Yeah, and so, that relationship between parents and children, and having to resolve a conflict and just have that person come back. I mean, we saw a little bit of that in the flesh, and they addressed that particular issue.
Yeah.
But this seems a lot worse because there's like, I don't know, there's some scene with somebody with like a pet or an animal, and it's like
Hmm.
squealing, and it was really upsetting. So we'll have to wait to see this upsetting movie when it
Can't wait.
happens.
Can't wait to see this really upsetting movie.
Yeah.
Speaking of things that are upsetting people, I do have one more piece of news, which is
You got to talk
well,
about the permafrost.
no, I don't care about the permafrost, even though it's issuing out million-year-old viruses like
Yes.
every day. No, Last of Us season two casting announcements are happening. People are Reddit, man, is a place where there's
Oh,
so much anger, but
it's a lot of anger in Reddit. Yep.
so people have been mad apparently about Last of Us 2 since it came out. I'm going to ignore that for the moment. But Last of Us 2 casting announcements. So for the role of Abby, they've cast Caitlin Dever, uh, who does not. Oh my God, all my phones are exploding right now. She does not immediately resemble the character from the video game. I've mentioned this before that Abby or the character that Caitlin Dever is being cast to play is quite jacked and
Yep.
she is quite slight. But you know what? I've seen like what's it called? The art that they're the concept art for her character has her looking more like Ellie, so it'll probably be fine and whatever. Who cares?
I really like Caitlin Dever a lot.
Oh, you've
So,
seen her and stuff.
well, I don't know if you ever saw Booksmart, but she's
No,
really good in that. Amazing. And um, I just think people should not jump to conclusions before they see what she can do.
right,
She's got
obviously.
she's got some pretty good um acting chops, like, and she's really just, I think she can do something with this role, and I don't know. I have no problem with her being in this. And again, like, I think if you look at the concept art and whatever, nothing's ever going to be like, I mean, come on, nothing is going to be totally perfect. It's not supposed to be an exact like replica of the video game. Um,
And I'm that's not the point I'm trying to make. I'm saying that there are people who are going to be upset about this.
right.
But I'm also saying, who cares? It'll be fine. They're just going out to find the best actors they can for the roles. Uh, I was kind of excited to see if they could find someone who was going to be the She-Hulk sort of character that Abby is in the video game. But at the end of the day, it's not the most important part about her character. It's her motivations and the way that she interacts with people.
I'll
So,
also point out that people were like being very critical of Bella Ramsey being cast when
and
she was
still are. Yeah,
um, when
and
they were
still
cast
are.
there. And they still are, and I think that Bella Ramsey did an incredibly good job, and the relationship between um like her character and Pedro Pascal's character are incredibly, like, that's what makes it. It's that relationship, and so I think people need to stand down a little bit. So I'm okay with Joel and Ellie meeting a new type of Abby, I
Right.
guess.
In
So
addition to Abby, they've also announced casting for Jesse, who's also a fairly significant part of the. of that story, who'll be played by, he's from Beef, which I've only seen the first episode of. I couldn't, it was pretty challenging. Young Mazzino is going to be Jesse, and Isabella Merced has been cast in the role of Dina, who is also a very important character in the
Um,
story. So they're putting together their cast. I don't know when they're going to start production, but I feel like hopefully, clearly we're not expecting this show to come out until 2025. So that's hopefully what we'll get.
you just reminded me because you mentioned beef, but we should make a big shout out to Stephen Yoon.
Did he get an
Uh,
award for that?
he did, and like it's pretty awesome. He absolutely deserved it, and like pretty um he was very, gracious and awesome. But I was very happy that he won. Um,
What?
though I admit I have not seen Beef, and I know I need to. So
Yeah, it's just
I
it's a tough one, man.
I think
It's
I know it's like I don't know. I see a lot of that rage happening anyway. Um,
yeah.
which I know like during my general commute, as recently as Friday, which I made the mistake of staying too late at work, and there was just all sorts of fun things happening at Bryant Park train station. Um, but I should watch it because it is very, very good. But he won Best Actor for a limited series in the during the Emmy Awards.
Hmm.
So that's pretty cool. Um,
Nice.
very psyched for him on that. Also big winners, and this is again like you know, uh, and he also won the Golden Globe too, along with Ali Wong, who is co-stars in Beef with him. But
Yep.
what was the other show that have you seen The Bear?
Yeah. Well, some of it. I haven't seen season two, but I got to the end of season one.
So that's another one that I know it's very good. I just haven't been able to watch because I think it will like stress me out.
It is stressful. It's just people yelling at each other for half an hour. Every
Jeremy,
episode is a lot of yelling, a lot of interpersonal angst. But I mean, it is also entertaining and good. It's just wow.
but both Jeremy Allen White and Io Edebiri won for The Bear, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah,
So pretty good show. I know they're all good shows, but I have to actually watch them. So many shows, so little time.
that's right.
Um,
On that note, I've been I don't know why. There's a lot of good shows out there that I haven't seen, but I've been rewatching slash binging Handmaid's Tale. For what reason, I don't know. It kind of just got stuck in my head, and then I had to finish. I hadn't seen the last couple of seasons, so now I'm caught
I
up.
stopped after the first only because it felt like I'll admit to you, it felt like it was too close to
Yeah,
like a
that's
possible
why I think that's
reality.
why a lot of people kind of had to take a break.
Yeah.
But so I've caught up. I would say season four and five are not the strongest. Season three was really, really good that I just rewatched. And there's another season coming out in 2025 also. So I'm
Hmm.
kind of looking forward to that. I want them to just tie up that story and I want to see who's getting what's coming to them.
Well, we shall see. I guess I should watch that too. Again, it's really hard for me sometimes to watch shows when it's, you know, bleak and wintry outside and
Sure.
all you want to do is watch happy things. Um, but that I'll just have to deal with it. And speaking of not necessarily happy things,
No, not happy
but
things.
you want to get into but it being bleak and horrible. Do you want to get into our review of The Signal?
Yeah, The Signal from 2007. You've already
Mhm.
mentioned that it has three directors.
Yep. Uh,
And it actually, there are three writers also. Each of them wrote one of the acts. I'm not sure then who wrote the introduction. I don't think that was detailed, but it's so clearly broken into these three acts. It's kind of
yeah.
like Dust Till Dawn in the sort of approach that they took. Man, I wonder if did it come out? It came out after From Dust Till Dawn, right? That came out a long time ago. But that
Yeah.
was the famous Tarantino, Robert Rodriguez um, picture that had kind of two acts in a way, where Tarantino wrote the first act and Rodriguez wrote the second, and this one has three very different feelings, but they are tied together.
Yeah, and I'd also like to point out that two of those directors appear as screaming men
Oh,
in the in the film.
There are a few screaming men in the film, so
Yes. So, but I just think it's funny that they are listed in the credits as basically Screaming Man and Screamy Man. It's
I
um
wonder if one of them was the screaming man who was also on fire while he was screaming.
it's very possible. But this the I would say like the Anessa Ramsey is one of the main leads. AJ Bowen plays her, and she's Maya. AJ Bowen plays her husband, and then Justin Wellborn plays like her lover. And then there's this other guy, and I guess to me, he takes like also kind of a supporting slash bigger role, but the guy that plays Clark, Scott Poitras.
Yeah.
And then, and there's other supporting cast, but it's mainly those people.
Oh, I would Sar. Did you say Sar also as Rod?
I view him as more supporting, but yes, he was in there. And then
He pulled. I think he pulled a lot of weight in the first act.
he did.
Yeah,
And then what was the name of the strange woman? The strange woman.
the one who played Anna.
Oh, Sherry Christian
Yeah,
plays Anna, and she's also a pretty pulling a lot in there.
in that
So
second act. Yeah.
yeah.
Uh,
I agree with you. I think that these three acts are clearly, what they are. The one comment I will make, and this is what I wish they had done, this movie was like an hour and 42 minutes or something like that. It
mhm.
was very long, and
Oh, you feel like that was too long?
oh my gosh, yes, it was so long,
Like
and
it's like 110 minutes.
it's so long, and for what it is, and it could have been so much better if somebody or all three of them had gotten together and agreed to tighten it up a lot. There's a lot of things that they could have done here that would have made it a better film.
Okay.
From my point of view, from a lot of different points of views in terms of like storytelling and it's not a linear tale, which is fine, and I have no issue with that. But it definitely felt like, and especially, I would say, especially like in the second act, where they just go on too long with their bits, which I was like, oh, come on, like this is just lame. Personally, I feel like the first part was maybe the strongest.
The first and second act, I would say, were my favorite. The third act kind of feels flabby and not really driven enough.
Hmm.
Um, the second act, while I'll agree it probably does go on too long, I think it's such a refreshing change of tone from the first one that it kind of revives the storyline, the stories that it's telling. And it gives a lot more angularity and depth to Lewis, the main antagonist, for the one sort of inner story that goes throughout the entire movie. And so I liked it for that. I didn't feel like it was too long, I guess, because I was able to sit in it. I mean, I also have some sentimental attachment to this movie. For some reason, I watched it 10, 15 years ago, and I've just always had scenes from the first and second act have just stayed with me. And I don't really understand why, because when I was rewatching it to talk about it today, I there were definitely parts that I had no recollection of, like Jim Parsons. No recollection of that character whatsoever.
Well, okay. So to clarify, and we can talk about it when we talk about the actual like sections. Um, I liked aspects of Act Two, but I guess what frustrated me is that it could have been so much better in my mind, if it had been edited down and been a little bit like slicker. Like, but I digress, and let's get into it. So the opening sort of scene is actually from another movie, and I'm assuming that it's supposed to be a scene that Maya and Ben are watching, or a movie, or it's on while they're sleeping, or is that like what's supposed to be happening?
I think so. Although, yeah, he talks about how the TV turned itself on later
Right.
in that scene. But yeah, I think that's the idea is that that's what maybe they fell asleep watching.
Yeah, and so it's like basically a horror thing called like Happy Hapgood or something like that, and it's pretty much like a like torture body horror kind of film. It felt a little Chainsaw Massacre-esque. So, and then they have this quote unquote quote signal. And at least in the olden days, when stations would go off air, usually you would get like, the sort of the tone, and sometimes they're like, whatever that whole placeholder thing would be, or sometimes you would just get static. I would say it was a little closer to the static than that tone, and it's like kind of like a distorted frequency. And Ben gets up and turns it off, and it turns out that, Maya's not supposed to be there so late because they're having an affair. And it goes into this whole thing. And I do think that this was very clever because basically, if Maya had done what Ben was saying and just stay and leave her husband and just like not go back, they probably would have been okay, right?
They may, I mean, they maybe they would have ended up watching the TV all night and gone completely insane too.
Maybe, but for whatever reason, Ben has figured out how to fight the signal or something. Maybe it's related to finding Maya or he's worried about Maya, but he doesn't seem to be as affected by this as other people are, or he has figured out a way to deal with it to some
Well,
degree.
as the movie goes on, you learn that nobody is a reliable narrator, including like your own perspective, because it's
True.
always kind of from somebody else's viewpoint.
Right. Right.
So who knows, honestly, at the end, right? Like how many like false trails do they lead
Right.
in the third act? So
But I will say, Maya's like, gotta get home. I will say this though, because like she's like, oh, I don't even have time to take a shower, so I'm gonna spray perfume on me so I don't smell like you. I think we can all agree that she probably needed to take a shower and she probably still smelled like him, even with the perfume covering it up. So just putting that out there. Um,
she
and
worked, yeah.
she was making up this, she was like, I'm gonna make up this story that I was out with drinks. It's like 2 in the morning, I think, right?
Midnight. She said it was
All right.
12:15 when they woke up, and she got home by 1.
Okay.
So, and
Yeah.
she works at a restaurant. She works at a restaurant. I feel like late nights are pretty normal
Yeah.
for people who
Okay.
work in
Fair, fair.
restaurants.
Um,
But yeah,
but anyway, she, kind of makes her way home. She had like a big part of this is that and I like what year was this supposed to be exactly? Was this supposed to be like earlier? Because she has a Discman and he made her a
yeah.
mix CD. So I feel
I
like
think
that's
there was
gotta be
a fair amount of overlap. It didn't go like immediately to
uh
to MP3
2007
players.
though. Really?
2007 is when it came out. Maybe it was filmed in 2005, 2006.
Mhm.
I think
Okay.
there was still a fair amount of CDs around
Yeah.
in those years.
Well,
I was definitely still using a lot of DVDs then. And I
anyway. She's got a love mixtape that Ben has made for her. It's fine. But this is something that she uses to sort of cut out the outside world. And as she's sort of trying to make her way home, this is a piece that I was like, huh, I don't know that any woman in a garage is going to walk in at as late at night as it was
yeah.
wearing a Discman. They're just not going to do that from a safety perspective. And then even more so, she runs into these two kind of weird people in the garage. One guy's just like, oh, I need help and all this other stuff. And again, you're not going to do this in a garage, like in an abandoned garage at midnight, if you are a woman. So I do have an issue with that.
Well,
But
this
again,
woman was concerned. I mean, the guy is bleeding too, which she doesn't actually know until she gets closer to him.
exactly. She
But
wouldn't do
yeah,
it. She would just say, hey, I'm going to go and find you help. But she certainly wouldn't get close enough to him. I just have to
that
say,
was it was disturbing though, the way that they did this. Not only is this guy bleeding, he's kind of sympathetic in a way because he's like, yeah, this guy just ran up and cut me and then ran away, and like he's upset. Then another guy starts yelling like wordlessly
well,
from
I think he's
another part of
one
the
of the
parking
Screaming
lot.
Men directors that we saw.
Oh,
Like
is
that.
he a screaming man?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Screaming
Okay.
Man.
Uh, but you can't make out at all what he's saying. And then he starts moving to me, this felt a lot like something they would have done in 28 Days Later. And
Yeah,
maybe it's
totally.
actually ripped from that because it has that vibe of Cillian Murphy's character walking into the church. It
Yeah,
has the
Killing
same
Murphy.
sort of, yeah.
That was an amazing scene. So I agree.
But so I this was evocative to me for that, the fact that she kind of barely gets away, but that these guys are also not, maybe they would have gotten overtly violent if she had delayed her departure, but they just kind of are looking at her from outside the car and not like trying to get in her way or stop her.
Yeah, and I do think, I mean, honestly, I do like the fact that whatever this signal is, and it's like over radio waves, phones, like TVs, like whatever you're talking about, it's affecting people in different ways and not always predictable ways.
Yeah.
Mm. And so I thought that was kind of an interesting idea. So she does barely get away, though I'll point out something, well, later on this comes into play, but like I don't know that her car auto locked. I guess she had the other door locked, but I just, I was very glad she got away from them. And she ends up, you know, getting home to her apartment building, and already things are kind of like
Oh, very
weirdly
strange. Yeah.
weirdly strange and chaotic, and she notices it, but it's not quite at the fever pitch it gets to later. So it's weird enough that things are happening, and it is something that she calls out, but something that she's like, maybe it's just like a full moon or something like that. But she sort of makes her way into the apartment, and there's like oddly sinister things. Like there's a woman that's kind of like following her down the hall. People are fighting with each other. Um,
Oh, well, like having arguments. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, like just but verbal arguments, not, the woman following her down the hall I thought was really great, and the perspective of the camera, how
Hmm.
you feel nervous for her because you're like, oh gosh, how close is that woman? Because she's acting kind of weird.
And just, it's like it's after midnight and there are like 10 people in the hallway of her
Hallway.
apartment building. Like that doesn't seem right. Just right there. I mean, maybe it is for her apartment building. Maybe it's just a bunch of like restaurant workers or something.
Right.
But it seems like there's way too much activity. And Janice does yell that down the hallway after she comes out and kind of jump scares Maya, Janice, her neighbor from across the hall, who's like, "Oh, Lewis is looking for you."
Right. And I
Uh,
should point out, like this is supposed to be they keep calling it Terminus, but it is Atlanta, which I guess is what the original name of Atlanta used to be, which is
yeah.
Terminus, which I didn't know, which also, you know, brings something about Walking Dead into perspective for me.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I'm sure that's where
but
they got the name for the
right,
episode.
but it's probably not normal to have this large a group of people all out and active at 1 in the morning.
No.
So
And Janice feels kind of normal at this point in the story. She's just, I don't know why she's
those
popping out in the
neighbors,
hallway, probably to yell at the people who are making too much noise.
yeah.
But she's just like, yeah, Lewis is looking for you. Okay, bye. And then goes back inside. And Maya goes inside her apartment where Janice has told her there's a bunch of people. He has friends over. And the friends are Jerry and Rod. Um, here's a hindsight sort of question. Did you recognize any of the actors from this film?
Um, I felt like I recognized the guy who played Rod. I feel like he's been in
He has been in a bunch. He was in Luke Cage. I guess he played a character called Anansi in Luke Cage. I don't remember who that character was.
um yeah, but I also feel like I recognized him from something else. Anyway, it'll
Only
eventually.
only a couple of them have Wikipedia pages. He's done a bunch of screen or
Oh, he
stage
was in The
stuff.
Blacklist too,
Okay.
and The Good Wife. So I feel like I've seen him in a lot of shows, and he's usually like, he's one of those kind of oh, I definitely recognize him from Luke Cage. I just pulled up a photo of him from it. Yeah, I remember him. Okay. Um,
Okay.
so anyway, it makes sense that he's familiar to me. I didn't really the other person that seemed familiar, but I don't know that I've seen him in much else was the actor who played Clark. He seemed really familiar to me, but I don't when I
I
looked at
agree. I agree, but he has no
yeah, when I looked at his
Wikipedia.
when I looked him up, he just doesn't have all that much. So maybe it's just one of those faces. I don't know.
Yeah.
But anyway, so Maya gets home, has the weird interaction with the nosy neighbor who's like, "You got blood on you," which is almost very Shaun of the Dead. You got red on you.
This is only a couple years after that, so yeah, I could
Right.
be making those
And
references.
and it is like, okay, let's be honest. She's like walking into this. Like the neighbor gives her the lowdown that his friends are all there, that he's been looking for her. And so she already knows, and it's late, and she knows she's already come up with an excuse that she's going to tell him, which is that she's out drinking with her friends, and the phones didn't work. And honestly, kind of plausible because her phone really doesn't work. And she walks in, and they're all kind of like very hyped up and overstimulated and fighting or sort of arguing, similar to what's happening in the hallway. But her arrival does bring the attention of Lewis on her, and he like goes and follows her into the bedroom, and he is very clearly aware that something is happening. And so she gives him her line about, the restaurant and drinking, and he's literally giving her the third degree,
He
like,
sniffs her. Like
yeah,
he's not.
smells her. He's like, "You
Yeah,
smell like perfume. What did you drink? Who were you with? Who was that person?" Like,
yeah.
so clearly the jig is up. But he allows her to like somehow get away with it a little bit, and then she's like supposedly going to go and take a shower. And then the argument between him and his two friends just kind of continues to escalate. And she notices it enough that, and the weird thing is that, like, she tells him it's barbecue sauce on her.
Yeah, why wouldn't she just say that a guy tried to mug me
Yeah,
or
because that
something?
would probably be, that's a real thing that happened.
Yeah.
Um, but anyway, she's like gonna go to the shower, but she notices how weird the conversations are between them. Like, Lewis is getting incredibly worked up, um, and definitely his perception of what's happening is distorted. Like, his friend is swinging around this bat in a weird way, and he's like, "Oh, you almost hit my wife," and he gets very like worked up about that, and then he says something else, which is, you know, basically implying that he knows exactly what has been happening with her,
Yeah.
and it
But it's
escalates.
attributing it to Jerry instead of to the
Yeah.
mystery Ben.
And she's seeing clips of this. Like, she goes into the bathroom and she's like, okay, that's weird. And then, so we see little snippets of this, which I thought it was kind of nice how they worked this, where it's like she tries to sort of disrupt it, but then she's like, I don't want to necessarily get involved because it seemed like Rod was helping to sort of de-escalate it
Yeah,
a
he was
little bit.
mediating. Yeah.
And then she's in the bathroom and we only hear sort of like the pinnacle, or the sort of like the crisis moment with the door closed, which I thought was kind of interesting and cool.
But she does step out to like see she hears a crash. She steps out. Jerry is just walking away from Lewis
Hmm.
when Lewis runs up behind him and hits him on the head with a baseball bat and then hits him several more times after he's on the ground.
Yeah.
And then Rod is like trying to wrest the bat away from him and disarm him. And Lewis looks up at her and just goes, "Go take a shower, honey."
Yeah.
That's when you're like, this dude is unhinged. This is crazy.
Well,
And
and
that's part of what this movie does, I think, well, which is like what they're saying is so different from what they're doing sometimes. Not always, but
or
when they do that, it's pretty disturbing.
right. Or there's like a logic in their minds to what they're doing. And so they're not reacting to the horrific things they're doing because there was a completely logical reason for doing it. They feel very justified. And they also feel like it's not weird. They do have moments where they question it, but when they're sort of under the control of the signal, whatever it might be, this is sort of a totally logical thing that he did because in his mind he was protecting his wife. And that seems to be a pretty big theme. We hear a character later on talk about this, that her father killed the dog because he thought the dog was attacking her when it was like a puppy. So this is they're kind of laying out the mythology, I guess, of what this is, and this is the first time we really see that. Um, so I thought that that was really interesting. Um,
And when we think about how much time has passed since the signal came on TV and she's now home, so it was like 12:15, the signal's on. In the
mhm,
parking lot, there are already crazy people, basically. Then at her apartment, there are crazy people who are not quite at the point of outward violence, but maybe there are just in their apartments. But and now she sees what's going on. She flees. She's
mhm.
like, "There is a fight going on. I'm getting out of here." She runs out into the hallway and there's a dead guy right outside her door.
Yep.
Like she slips in the blood. She looks down the hall, and there's the guy with the garden shears who just snips a woman's throat who is
Very
running
matter
toward
of
him.
factly, it's really disturbing.
It's a like her back is to you, so you don't really see it, but you just see him kind of approach her, hold out the shears, just a surgical snip, and she falls down and then is like wiggling on the floor. And Maya is justifiably freaking out and tries to quietly get her way into Janice's apartment. And things kind of just keep going and accelerating from here through
Right.
a lot of Act One.
Well, I did like how, she gets into Janice lets her in, and you
Yeah.
think Janice is going to help her, and then Janice starts to try to kill her.
She's
And
just
then the
smothering her,
right, and
and
then the
not listening to Maya, who's trying to get her to close the door. This is also one of the only conversations that I don't think it does pass the Bechdel test, but it's like the only conversation between two women that's not about a guy. But the only reason that it's like that is because Janice is trying to murder Maya, and
right, I don't
Maya's actually trying to talk about a guy with the shears who is coming through the open door. So it
right.
doesn't even pass. So I will say, like, this film, written and directed by three dudes, is definitely not a film about a woman, even though Maya is the central character. It's not, like,
Well,
it's a very
as
dude
as
driven
I
film.
pointed out, they did some things that women would never do. So yeah, I kind of agree with that.
Yeah.
And this is the snippy guy. It's like, and I do think that they do portray this.
Oh, fantastic, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, I think that they really give you a sense of sort of what the signal does to people because it's like he has a mission and he's just doing this stuff like very matter of factly, and it makes sense to him.
It's kind
Um,
of like he just wants people to be quiet, maybe, because
maybe.
he puts his finger up to his lips when he hears screaming down the hallway and looks at her and then leaves
Well, he
to go
only
take care
leaves.
of the screaming.
Well, he starts to leave, but she closes the door and locks it, but
Yeah.
then he starts banging on the
Oh
door because
yeah,
of
true.
the noise. So maybe it is the noise factor, but that was a very like good scene and a good sequence of events. And I really liked how it made sense, like the way she closes the door and locks it. She does it in exactly the way you should if you're in that situation. Like she's really trying not to draw his attention.
Yeah.
So I felt like that editing was really great. I also liked how, she's on the ground because her neighbor has tried to kill her. So she's like in this like kind of weird, awkward position, but the way they're filming it is exactly from her perspective, which I
That's
think is
true.
kind of cool. And then you just see like the Shears guy go out of frame when she closes the door. So I really liked how they did that.
And then she basically just hides under a table for the rest of the night
Right.
until the sun comes up. So letting you know, and what's letting you know that like this has gone wide is one interstitial shot of like an outside street with bodies on it. Um, and then the sun comes up and you're back with her.
Yep. And then I should point out this first one was the one written directed by David Bruckner.
Right.
Um,
And this act begins with its own title card after she leaves Ben's apartment.
yep.
Transmission One, Crazy in Love is the name of it. And so basically the first things that happen in this act were everything in the parking garage until, whoa, yeah, it's still going throughout the rest of this section.
Yeah, and so, she's then decides, okay, I'm gonna get out of here. And
Yeah.
she runs into her apartment, puts her shoes on, gets her keys. She sees things like, the fact that her husband is duct taped and sees her and is so upset that he like falls on the floor and there's like kind of a knife by his head. But she does not let him go. And you know what? Probably a good idea that she didn't. And she basically gets her stuff, starts to leave. And again, I thought the editing here was really great because she's like certainly in shock and she puts on her little like Discman. Probably not, again, not the smartest thing to do, but maybe that is why they set up the precedent where she does an unsafe thing where she needs to probably be aware of things in the parking garage, and this is a similar thing. But
Hmm.
she starts to walk down the hall and she gets like yanked into the utility closet, and there's like a great cut where there's a little bit of time passage, and I think they showed it well. And then
Is
you
it
see
even a cut, or is it just like they just keep
there's
the
a
camera rolling?
they do, but it's like a time, almost like a time lapse because you see
Yeah.
Ben come in and there's definitely like you hear rattling in the utility closet, but you don't see what's happening. And then you see Ben kind of like whisk by.
Yeah.
Um, and then it shows you what's happening with her, which is Rod has like taped her up, so we now know he's probably the one who taped up Ben. Sorry, he he taped up Lewis. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
And he's got like this weird weapon of like duct tape knives to like a staff. And the really interesting thing about Rod is that he is like, everybody's gone crazy, and he's clearly crazy too, just has slightly more judgment
A
than others.
little bit, yeah. But his monologue, or this like jabber he's doing at her, is
Mm.
kind of what tips you off that he's gone crazy. But he's also telling you get some. Don't you get to see like part of what he did overnight? Yeah, because he's
Oh
like
yeah, you
taping
see
up
it all.
people. He's murdering the guy with the shears, or at least fighting him. I thought it was a really cool sort of montage, but you do get the feeling that he is at least mildly crazy, but it's not enough to dissuade Maya from like trying to escape with him. I think she thinks that she can maybe get him back under control when
Yeah.
when they do decide to leave.
Well, I
Uh,
think she also knows, like, look, he had taped her up. She needs him to untape her.
yeah,
She also knows that he's got this big knife thing, and she probably is like trying to figure out what to do with him, which is ultimately what happens. And here's the part that I'm like, ugh, come on. I guess you need it, but I don't know. Um, she's like, as they start to kind of make their escape, he gets distracted by this woman who's walking down the street. And he's all focused on whether someone is crazy or not, whether someone needs help or not. Like, so to like he's still trying to do the right thing, sort of.
yeah,
This policewoman shoots him.
doesn't
And
kill him. This
no,
guy's hard to kill.
and then he goes and kills her brutally.
Yeah.
And
He's also
so
been hit in the head with a hammer, and he has like huge, like open wound in the back of his head that he's also shown us. But yeah, so now he's been shot, and he's like hitting this woman over and over again. Maya calls to him, like, "Come on, we gotta go." And then eventually gets in the car and starts to drive it because she's just looking at this guy wailing on this corpse. But then he yells for her to stop, and she does, and so he gets in. And she learns to regret that decision pretty quickly.
but this is the part where I'm like, she saw what he was doing. I think drive away too sweet here. I think she had enough time. She could have locked the door.
She could have. I don't know why she changed her mind. Probably because, yeah, I don't know why she changed her mind. I
But then
mean,
she's stuck
she's
with
also
him in
been
the
exposed to
car.
the signal a little bit, so who can say exactly
Yeah.
why she's doing what she's doing at this point?
But she has her own goal. She's going to get to the train station. That's been her goal all along. That's the last conversation she had with Ben. It's like, let me get to the train station, platform 13, and get out of this place. Leave Terminus. So maybe she's not fully on her A game. I thought that the car sequence was actually pretty good because Rod is like slowly falling apart. There is a little bit of a weird thing here where he turns on the radio and the radio is clearly off, but like the signal's coming through loud and clear, so that was kind of odd. But I like how it escalates here and he just like starts to lose it, and then suddenly she becomes the enemy to him,
Yeah,
and he hits her. And she's like kind of stunned, and then she has to make a decision like, oh gosh, he's gonna kill me if I stay in this car with him, and he hasn't put his seatbelt on, so she's just like, all right. And she crashes deliberately into this dumpster to basically stop his assault. And he is knocked out, at least at first. And I just thought that that was a really excellent set of like scenes and editing there.
yeah. And as she gets her Walkman and starts to and tries to leave, he's telling her, "Don't leave me. I don't have the crazy."
Yeah, and she's like, oh
Which
yeah, you do.
Yeah, buddy, you just hit me 3 times while I was driving. I'm pretty sure you have been crazy. Also, a man approaches the car with a shovel. He seems nice enough. This is Clark, and we'll get to know Clark a little bit more later. And another woman is just walking past her in like medical scrubs covered in blood
Yeah.
as she walks away from the car. It's a very weird scene where suddenly there are people who are not attacking her. And Rod had said during his feverish monologue that 1 out of every 2 people, I don't, it's a weird way to say that, but like basically every other person has been affected by the signal in his
Mm.
perception and is trying to kill somebody else or everybody else.
Right.
And that's almost the end. An unconscious
Well,
Ben is being dragged into a van by Lewis. Uh,
yeah,
and
like,
Just as she drove away with Rod, you saw Ben kind of stumble out of her apartment building. And by
yeah.
the end of this first act, Ben is being dragged into a van, and Lewis is definitely up and at him. And then we begin transmission two, which is entitled The Jealousy Monster. And
Right.
this starts with a right
But
away with a very different theme.
but before we get there, though, she's still on her I'm getting to platform 13 at the train station. So
And she
she
told that to Clark too, for some
yeah,
reason.
and she puts on her little Walkman and walks away, and that's her goal. So that's what she's doing, and she's out of here.
Yeah.
And
I
we get
mean,
into the
again, like a lot of the people who are infected have goals too.
right.
Anna's is to throw a party.
Yep.
And we learn about her mission here. Their apartment is very pink. She's very pink. Her husband has very red lips.
Yes.
Um, but of course, when we meet him at first, he's already dead. But then there's like a flashback.
Hmm. He's not alive very long in this particular thing,
I
even
mean,
in
he's dead when we first meet him because she's telling him, "I know you think this party's a bad idea."
yeah.
Um, and then Clark is at the door and he's like, "Oh, hey, Anna, I need to get back my hatchet and some garbage bags from Ken, who's dead." Does Ken even get a credit? Because honestly, he was pretty freaking creepy too.
Ken, yes, but I don't think he got a credit. I don't know.
Well,
But
uh, so he's like, "Oh, Ken's dead." Um, and then quickly we get the flashback of Ken had just turned on the TV while they were getting ready for the party, and then turns around and tries to kill Anna. Like it happened almost instantaneously for the two of them. So I don't know if that's like a continuity thing that maybe the three directors didn't quite have on the same page, or if that's just, whatever. It is what it is.
or maybe Ken was just, faking his niceness, and there we go.
Yeah. And there's a lot of funny lines in this act. This is the funny part of the movie,
Yes,
for
yes.
better or for worse. And her line to Clark here is, "Yeah, I know he's gross now, or he's kind of gross now."
I know. And also Clark just kind of takes it in, very matter of factly as well.
Clark
Um,
is another one of these characters you don't really know to what extent he's infected. He certainly is exposed to the signal much more as the story goes on, but early on, you're not sure. Like he has killed Rod by this point. He's dragged him out of the crashed car, and was, I think, trying to help him when Rod attacked him, and so he cut off his head with the shovel. We get to see that in the flashback too.
all
Um,
right, let me just say, Ken, the actor who plays Ken,
yeah.
let's have a credit. His name's Christopher Thomas, and he's in a lot of things, but not anything that we have seen.
Well, the look on his face as he turns to Anna is just extremely evil.
Yep.
And everything. I think, yeah, like the makeup, and maybe not the makeup, but certainly the costuming in this scene were fantastic.
Yes.
Clark is trying to explain what's going on outside. He seems to be the exposition guy. He's always talking about like the science behind the signal and what's happening, and chemistry in the brain and all this kind of stuff. It's a lot of BS, but it's also interesting. And he's talking about how the party is the last thing anybody's going to be thinking about. Anna, nobody's coming to your party, and then the doorbell keeps ringing,
Yep.
which is one of the other kind of running jokes of this part of the film. But at the door is not a party goer; it's Lewis,
Yeah.
and he seems pretty compos mentis. He's like, "Oh, I'm the pest control guy. Somebody saw a rat. Maybe I should help you out," and talks his way
Really
inside.
sprays poor Clark in the face with poison. And then, and then we see a little bit of what's going on, which is that, like, from Lewis's perspective, Anna is Maya, and he is viewing everything like surrounding Maya. Like he has his own sort of play that's or like whatever he is seeing is not necessarily real. And we see this from Anna's perspective as well, where she's like imagining that Ken is still alive, and often it's Clark kind of like in that role. Um, and the only thing that really snaps Lewis out of this is that Anna's like, I'm not your wife, or this isn't who you think, this is our friend, and
Yeah.
um, actually makes him pause and rethink things. And that's the only thing that seems to shake him out of it. And we see this happen a couple of times. Like it's got to be sort of like this direct sort of clash with reality that makes the person snap out of it. But it's not foolproof, obviously, because
Yeah.
eventually Lewis just goes completely off the rails.
He yeah,
But
he snaps out of it twice in this
yeah,
section. And maybe that's part of the fluff that that you could have seen more of this cut into just one snap out of it than Descent into
Yep.
Madness.
Yes.
And I think that maybe the Jim Parsons part could have been cut if you're trying to
I
aggressively get
don't
rid of stuff.
I don't think you need it. I think that the thing you don't need his part at all. I do think that the part where her niece or her friend shows up
Yeah,
and he pretty much just kills her outright for no reason, because he thinks she has a knife, but it's her keys. That I think was great, but I don't think you need to get into all of this. I think you could have cut probably at least 10 to 15 minutes off of this whole thing.
Hmm.
Um, and mainly the part is that he thinks it's Maya and he's somehow thinking that Clark is somebody else. He eventually views Clark sort of as an ally for a bit anyway.
For a bit, and
And
then again it turns. There's a lot of this black comedy humor in this section too, where they're just kind of observing what's going on in the world and making comments like, "Yeah, things are crazy right now. Let's go have cocktails," and these
right, and
kinds
as
of
they're sitting in
things.
this blood-spattered living room,
Yeah, right.
I mean,
I love what you've done with the place. I mean, some of that is coming from Jim, who we don't know what his infection status is. He's just a horrible person.
yeah,
Uh, but
yeah,
again, yeah, we don't really need his
right.
part of the story.
And eventually we have, like it does completely go off the rails. And this is this is the part that I think could have been edited tremendously. I don't think you can do all the things. You can have Anna thinking that Clark is Ken. You can have like the things that are happening where Lewis is getting confused about who is who. You can have all of that but you don't need to show it as much as they did. I don't think you need the scene where she's like under the bed and eventually we don't even see, but he pulls her out, he pulls Ken out. They're having a little corpse party. And then it just gets really horrible where he's basically torturing Anna because he wants to know where Maya has gone. He's put two knives into Clark, like basically holding Clark in place in a chair, which is horrific. And he basically kills Anna using like insecticide, both on her face and down her mouth. And it's like, that's the part I was like, come on, this is just like, sure, if you want to do that, I guess, but it felt honestly
Egregious.
just ridiculous and really just over the top. And I fast forwarded through those scenes. I was like, this is just bullshit. I think you can get to the parts of the story. This seemed all so gratuitous to me,
Yeah.
and it didn't move along the plot line. I also actually felt that about the whole, like, maybe if you're building trust between Ben and Clark, some of the stuff that happens where, you know, he comes in, he basically saves Clark from Lewis. There's the thing with the signal, which I guess you can see that Ben is not as affected or has figured out a way around it. And he even talks to Clark a little bit about that. But then they end up in Clark's apartment with Lewis in pursuit. Lewis never would have gotten up if his head had been bashed in the way it seemed like Ben bashed his head in. And that whole scene and the whole scene with like Rod's head, um,
Yeah.
other than to demonstrate the fact that Clark is clearly also affected by this, which I think we already knew. It just
Well,
felt
he'd been forced to watch The Signal by Lewis during the
right,
end of the second act, and this is where the Ben coming in and knocking out Lewis is the where the second act ends, and
right,
then Transmission 3: Escape from Terminus begins
right,
with Ben's flashback actually of what he's been doing since he woke up in the back of the van,
right.
outside of Anna's party, and then I think there's another flashback back to what he did with Lewis in the apartment building, which was free him
Hmm.
and then hear the gunshot from Rod getting shot and then like trying to catch up about getting his ass kicked.
Right.
I mean, honestly, he shouldn't be wandering around
No,
as beaten as he's been. Yes, and Lewis has been beaten. Also, there's a lot of people operating in
with head
ways that they,
injuries that should
yeah,
not be.
yeah. Yeah, the whole Rod's disembodied head part doesn't it doesn't feel that necessary, except that it's like Ben sort of manipulating Clark into telling him what he already knew, but like in a way where he felt like he was getting this information from Rod's head. And we kind of feel like Ben has decoded the signal he talks about how he knows it's a lie, even though he stayed up all night watching it. And you're just like, oh, okay, yeah, sure, you've solved it, you're fine, obviously. Uh, so yeah, there's a lot of like, who's the movie wants us to think that Ben is the hero, and so I think you can sort of make that your understanding, but I think we've seen what this thing is doing to people, and so I think it's okay to also be like, I don't know about that. So by the end of the this basement scene, it gets pretty gross again, where they're like drilling into Rod's Lewis's arm.
Yeah.
um and they yeah, Lewis is like the most impossible guy to kill. They beat him up a bunch of times and then they run away. um and Clark puts on a tinfoil hat, which is another piece of this levity that his character sort of brings to the movie. It's like levity, exposition, and maybe you're crazy. We're not quite sure. Does he ever actually do anything violent to anybody?
Well, I mean, he um what
Oh, he
you mean
killed Rod, but does he
killed
do
Rod,
anything? That was
but Rod was
self-defense.
that was somewhat self-defense. There's some implication that why he's running around with the shovel.
Oh, he does screw Lewis's arm to the door, but Lewis is also trying to break in to kill them in that scene. But like he was kind of laughing while he did it, which felt a little bit
Yeah,
yeah, sketchy. But so they're basically Lewis. Oh, and the Lewis and Clark joke that Jim made,
yeah, yeah.
gives us nothing. But Clark and Ben are now in a car and they're driving to the terminal, but they run out of gas. Clark is still talking about like the science behind the signal, what it means, how we've like left ourselves open to this. And I think that's what Ben tells him, because between the two of them, they both like sort of have this understanding about what's going on, but I don't think they do. They're just rationalizing and being crazy people.
Like I do think that the cast is good. I just think that I have to say it. I think the directors each wanted their own little thing and felt like they had to go to whatever length. So this whole thing with the screen, the arm in the door, and like all these antics, just it's each person trying to do their own thing, which it doesn't necessarily make it a cohesive story as a whole.
It's
Um,
certainly not cohesive.
and
Yeah.
and so again, you get a lot of conflicting mythologies, maybe depending on who was directing it. And so like there's a slight explanation where you have between Ben and Clark, where you know Clark's trying to say, "Oh, this is what I think the signal is," and like ends up, the little tinfoil hat thing. Um, and then again, Ben is sort of just wants to find Maya. It's interesting that these two characters that are obsessed with Maya, that's all they really want. So
Single-minded obsession. Clark is kind of the only one without. I mean, he's obsessed with what the signal is. He like with his
right, but he
blabber.
doesn't have a goal like they do, sort of.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, this is the part of the film that I think has the least amount of focus, even
Yeah.
though it's like getting us to Maya, getting us to the train station. Once we get there, there's like a weird scene where there are some people wandering around. There are
Yeah.
some dead bodies lying around. Nobody's attacking Clark and Ben, but Lewis has beaten them there, improbably.
Hmm?
And there's yet another showdown where Lewis actually once again kind of beats Ben and has almost certain maybe killed Clark. We're not sure. Um, but eventually Ben, who watches the screen for a little while to like get charged up, then convinces Lewis that he is Lewis. It gets into some really like
Yeah.
wild, abstract, everybody's insane, this is crazy
Yeah.
territory. And I forget, does Lewis kill himself? Oh, he
No.
punches the TV until he gets electrocuted.
Oh yeah, he gets electrocuted. And then there's like a crazy weird scene that supposedly it's like Ben getting out of there with Clark and Maya and this whole like, they're getting clothes, they're on a train, it's in the
Yeah,
sunlight. And then it
they're
turns out
drinking
that's
water.
not
They're healthy. They're fine.
yeah. And then suddenly they're not, and he has to get Maya out of this catatonic state she's in. And he saves her with a Joy Division cover, which is what that song is that they keep hearing. Um, and and then I guess you can surmise that things might be okay.
I mean,
Maybe.
all we really know is that she closes her eyes finally.
Yeah.
Uh, and that's it. Fade to black, right?
Yep.
Um, so yeah, the third act is the least satisfying of them in a way, but it's so hard to finish these kinds of stories. This is always the hardest thing to do. They they do a lot of, I mean, and there have been these like threads of consistency throughout with the signal and what it's doing to people and these characters, this love story. But in the end, you're left with they're probably all insane. Humanity is gone. This is a disaster. So it's pretty normal stuff for a zombie type dystopian film. Um, and again, I don't know, like for a fairly unknown cast to me, still, even though I looked up Clark's IMDb, or the guy who plays Clark, Scott Poitras, he's actually done a ton.
Yeah.
He's done a ton of TV,
That may be, he looks so familiar.
yeah,
So,
uh,
yeah.
and movies. So he's like on Homeland. He was on Turn, that spy film or series about the Revolutionary War. He's done a lot of stuff, so that's probably why he's so recognizable. He was in Greenland with whatever that Scottish actor's name is. Anyway, so he's done a lot. That's the end of the movie, though. Like we kind of we get there. This is obviously not a zombie film. It's like a Crazies style film, and like I texted you, HA, it just has been staying in my head for years. It might not have that effect on you. Um,
No, I mean, here's the thing. I think that there was a lot of good filmmaking here. I think the cast was great. I think that some of the storytelling was great. I just think it could have been tightened up to be a really great kind of slasher film.
mhm.
And I think some of the inconsistencies in maybe what each director had in terms of their vision, could be the culprit, and nobody wanted to sort of like kill their darlings, as it were. Um, but I think to do that, you do have to sacrifice something, and I wish they had. And so, there's also a thing that I bump on in this, which, again, 2007, but it does feel like there's a lot of misogyny going on here, specifically with the treatment of the Anna character. Like that plays out more, and a little, and with Maya too. Like I wish they had done a lot more with Maya as a whole versus the focus all being on some of these kind of crazy male characters. And it could have been a more interesting film that way, but that's just me nitpicking a little bit. I do think that the makeup effect was really good here. They didn't have to do, these aren't like true zombies, so you don't have to go crazy. But I do think everything was pretty effective in terms of like revealing. Weirdly, the scene that you mentioned with the sort of random woman with the blood coming down her was to me very effective because she's just kind of walking like, "Hey, I'm not recognizing this," and the sort of general sort of disarray of characters after they've done these things, not necessarily registering like it's just normal, like
Yeah.
especially the Anna party scenes where it's just like everybody's sort of bloody. There's blood on the floor. Like there's no normalcy about this, but they don't register it as being weird. Like I thought that stuff was pretty cool, and the sets were used well. Because really, what we're talking about, we have the scene with her and Ben in the apartment, the scene in the apartment building, scene at Anna's place, and the scene at the train station, and like they did a good job with like a small budget. So overall, I'm favorable. I just think it could have been a really great film, and that's I think the frustrating part for me.
Yeah, it definitely is not a perfect film, and I think some of that probably does stem from the three-headed monster element of it, and that's probably unavoidable. Um, Even though they did it, I'm sure very consciously. Obviously, they did it very consciously because you can't get more different than Acts 1 and 2. Um, Even though they're still both horror, they were just very different. But yeah, so that's The Signal, 2007. There it is. Not to be confused with The Signal 2014, which is a Lawrence Fishburne film about muscular dystrophy. I'm not sure. And then I guess the one that we saw was The Cell, I think. Yes, the Cell is by Stephen King from
Uh,
2006 is when he wrote the novel, and then the movie with Samuel L. Jackson came out. some other time. No one
Mm.
is safe. Everyone is infected.
Yep.
So there it is. We're still kind of waiting for Rick and Michonne show to arrive.
Yep.
So we will in the meantime satisfy our bloodlust with
Some vampire stuff, I'd
vampire
say.
stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
What are we gonna watch?
So what is it? Next time we're gonna watch Dompier on Netflix, and then after that we've got some more vampire stuff lined up, and we'll get to that when we get to it. But hopefully you guys enjoyed The Signal, and we'll be back again soon. So hopefully you'll join us. Let us know what you think. You can send us an email at reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com. And we are also, all of our episodes are online at reanimated.podbean.com.
So until next time, thank you for listening and thank you for tolerating our hiatus.
Yeah.
See you soon. Ciao.
All right. Bye bye.